For this week's review, I went to an RPG that I had finished a few years back and figured it might make for an interesting review, Eeeeees 1. The title screen also calls it Ancient Eeeeees Vanished Omen, and I'm sure that there are other titles and subtitles for it since it was originally released for the Japanese PC 8801 in 1987 and ported an almost infinite number of times. But just know that it's the first game in a fairly large series that's still going to this day. I'm using the more modern Chronicles version that I bought off of GOG that gives you the first two games for this review. However, just because it's modern doesn't mean it gives modern resolutions, as when I was recording I couldn't get OBS to capture it as a native full screen application. So if it looks blurry, well, that's why. I can assure you that if you play the game yourself, it looks significantly cleaner. The story of Eeeees starts off with a young man named Adol who washes up on shore after a shipwreck that occurred due to a phenomenon called the storm wall. He is nursed back to health and is sent on a task by a rebel, but eventually meets up with the fortune teller Sarah. This fortune teller then gives him his quest: find the books of Eeeees before evil does. From here, you navigate through 3 towns and a small handful of dungeons in an adventure to find plenty of items and kill lots of creatures. One of the things that sets Eeeees apart from the remainder of action RPGs is the combat. There is no attack button, as you might have expected in a top-down game like this. As such, you attack by simply bumping into your foes. But timing and angles have a lot more to do with the success of the attack. Rushing headfirst into a creature is ill-advised, as it's almost guaranteed that you'll take damage at that point. Instead, what you want to do is hit them from the side, back, or from the front at a 45-degree angle. Basically, strike anywhere except for dead on. And you're going to want to get used to this because you'll be fighting a lot. You'll probably do a bit of grinding at the beginning of the game to get cash in a few early levels. Cash isn't really used for much except for buying a couple pieces of equipment and maybe a healing potion. But in the second part of the game, the money is absolutely useless. Actually, when you get to the latter half, combat as a whole becomes secondary to traversing the areas. That's because Adol maxes out at level 10, and it's very easy to reach this. So at this point in the game, you may want to try to skip combat as much as possible to just get to the end of the game. Which is fine, because a lot of these enemies are deadly if you get suckered into fighting them. So since you'll be doing quite a bit of fighting, how do you heal? There are 2 ways. First, the healing potion that you can buy in shops or find in chests. You can only ever carry 1, which does kinda suck, but I will admit that I've only ever had to use it once against a boss. Secondly, you can just stand in place in an outdoor area. Your life will quickly tick up, and this is huge when just starting the game, as when you're just getting used to the combat, you will be taking damage. When you are in a dungeon, only specific rooms will allow you to heal, and that's if they exist at all. You can eventually find a ring that you can equip to allow you to heal in dungeons though, and this is a true lifesaver. You'll notice that the game has a pretty rapid speed to it. This allows quick traversal through the game world, but it also means that it might be a bit more difficult to be accurate in your strikes in combat. You'll get used to it quickly, which is good because the constant running is going to be necessary. See, the game has a good story and all, but it's presented in a way that sometimes makes it a bit confusing on where you need to go next. Sometimes it's spelled out for you, but if you missed it, the follow-up conversations may not be very helpful. So there will be times where you're exploring everywhere possible, just trying to figure it out. Which is fine because, again, this may help alleviate the grind for experience and gold. The benefits of this are immediately apparent when fighting the bosses. If you are underleveled or have crappy equipment, bosses will feel nearly impossible. But then when you equip the higher tiered sword and level up once or twice, the boss will become a pushover. This is seen early in the game against the first boss. The arena is daunting. An under-equipped warrior boy fighting a hulking magician with 6 pillars of flame spitting out of the walls. Not ideal, I must say, but increase your level and gear quality and you'll be able to walk right through them, pretty much literally. This is true for most bosses, or really, most areas of the game. In fact, at higher levels, you might be able to pretty much brute force your way through any threat the game throws at you, even head on. Again, it's very easy to hit the level cap within a few hours of playing. By the time you hit the abandoned mine, you're probably going to be at 10 or nearly there. After this, you enter the Darm Tower, which takes up nearly the entire second half of the game. It's a massive 25-floor dungeon with multiple objectives that need to be completed. Again, some of these tasks aren't explicitly explained to you. For example, you have to use a ring that would normally kill you to open a sealed door. There is a room that will quickly drain your life unless you use a hammer to tear out a chunk of a specific column. And there are some irritating teleportation puzzles that need to be navigated. Add in the fact that you'll be going up and down the entirety of the tower a few times to get the last few books of Eeeeees, and you're going to be done with it by the time you hit the final boss. And the final boss? Holy crap. Spoiler alert, I'm going to talk about him for a few seconds, so yeah, holy crap. He has only one phase, which is kind of nice, but there are constant fireballs being slung at you. But even worse, every time you strike him, whose name is Darkfact, which has to be one of the lamest names I've ever heard for a villain, he creates an instant kill pit where he stands. That means that 1, you might get trapped in a corner with no way to get out other than sacrificing yourself, or 2, you might end up instantly dead if you can't move out of the way when introducing your sword to Darkfact. But if you give it enough time, you'll get him, at which time the game sets up for the sequel, Eeeeees 2. Eeeeees 1 comes off as a bit easy, well, for the most part. But this is fine, since the story is engaging, the dungeons are varied, and the combat is solid. The game also can be completed in a small handful of hours, so it's fairly short, which is good since max level can be obtained in a fraction of that. However, the music of the game makes the time fly by. The music is absolutely phenomenal. The towns are all typical peaceful tunes, but once you get to the overworld, wow. There are a lot of guitars, and I approve. The music just gets better as you enter the dungeons, with epic themes that are appropriate to the individual zone. And then when you get to Darm Tower, there are a few tracks that depend on where you are in the tower. These are also fantastic, which is good since you'll be spending a ton of time in here. Eeeeees 1 Chronicles plus Vanished Omen, insert additional subtitles here, is a fantastic action RPG that can be completed in a weekend. The unique but solid combat, rocking soundtrack, beautiful visuals, and great story set up a perfect foundation for the series. I've only played the original game so far, but I've been meaning to check out the rest of the series. Have you played any of the other games? Let me know. But until then, I'd suggest Eeeeees 1 Chronicles. Final score? 6 out of 7. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.